Bobby Carpenter joining us. Bobby, good morning, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks, man. I got a lot of different storylines to hit with you. Obviously, we want to talk a little A&M, and I know you talk all things college football there on SiriusXM. But I guess first off, Ohio State this year, there's different ways to kind of look at what the expectations are. They should be one or two of the best teams in the country. I've asked this storyline a couple different times this week. I just want to get your perspective. Do they have to beat Michigan and make title game? Or is beating Michigan enough? Just kind of give me what you think has to happen for Ryan Day in this particular year.
Well, it's interesting because for so long, beating Michigan was always part of that road. You could not win a national title without beating Michigan. And then 2 years ago in 2022, that almost happened, where they played Georgia down to the wire and a 52-yard field goal away from probably beating TCU in the national championship. And that would have been kind of a unique feeling where you lose to your rival, but you're still able to win the ultimate prize. And, it's a deep-seated rivalry. I'm sure you guys have, with Texas and A&M heating back up this year, that's going to be a big one that gets rolling. So, not winning that game, but then you get to the playoff and you would get a chance to potentially, go the long way, because I don't know if you lose that game if you can win the conference, so you have an extra game. I think you almost need to do both this year, given the fact that you've lost to them 3 years in a row and you didn't play them that fourth year because of COVID. So it's been so long since you've gotten that win. If it would be a situation where, hey, you won 4 of the last 5 and maybe you lose 1, but you still win a national title, I think it's probably okay. But this year, a lot of those guys, there's about 7 or 8 seniors that all came back who hadn't beaten Michigan, who hadn't won a Big Ten championship. And yes, they want to win a national championship too, but those 2 goals along the way, I think, are just about as critical in their minds as winning the ultimate prize.
Bobby, I want to go back to last season. I don't know how much you remember about the Ohio State-Notre Dame game, but we're mentally preparing for that first week when Texas A&M does host Notre Dame. Talk to me about what you saw or what you've seen from the Notre Dame defense that did hold Ohio State to just 17 points, but the Buckeyes obviously ended up winning that game.
Well, they did, and that Notre Dame defense is really good. It's very stout. They're always going to be well coached and very physical up front. They've got, I believe, the Nagurski winner coming back, Lombardi Buckeye Award, one of the major awards for one of their linebackers. They're a very, very talented group. They do a good job. Like you said, they're ultra physical. Their corners are good, not great. So there's opportunities out there. But this isn't a team where they're going to give you plays. You have to earn it. Marcus Freeman has done a good job there over the last couple of years recruiting talented players, but they're very disciplined. Big plays, if you get them, it's because you had to beat a guy. They're not going to be out of position, and very rarely will the guys not make the plays. So you're going to have to see a lot of sustained drives. And I can't wait, because that Saturday night's going to be one heck of a game to open the season.
Well, let's talk about Coach Elko, what he did at Duke and what he did at A&M, what he did at Notre Dame, and the fact that he's going to be leading this team that, let's face it, they've had a lot of talent throughout the years, haven't gotten it done to the level we expected. What do you think about Coach Elko?
From everything that I've seen of him and watching him at Duke, watching him obviously at Notre Dame, he's been a heck of a coach. He's a very disciplined guy, and typically when you get a former defensive coach, and they're all about discipline, they're all about toughness. And so there's not going to be certain rules or guys being undisciplined. If there's one thing they're going to do, they're going to win or lose on their terms. And their terms are always going to be discipline and tough football. And, honestly, I don't think those have been the calling cards for the Aggies the last handful of years under Jimbo Fisher. So I think you're going to see a restoration of that. And then also the fact that it'll be interesting that it's a chess match between him and Riley Leonard. I mean, he coached Riley Leonard at Duke. Riley Leonard went against his defense on a regular basis during camp and spring ball. The knowledge of each party, which will be greater? I tend to think I always err with the coach in that situation. Riley Leonard's a playmaker. He's going to be a tough guy to stop, and he's a chain mover. He's someone that, when things break down, he is able to move the chains to keep that thing rolling. So there's a lot of positives there. Riley Leonard can get it done. But Mike Elko, obviously that defense is going to be much better, and I look for a much more disciplined offense as well.
Bobby, I want to ask you about, obviously being a Big Ten guy, do you think the gap has narrowed between the SEC and the Big Ten, considering the Big Ten just won the national championship, how good Ohio State's expected to be, the expansion of the conferences and whatnot? Do you feel like it's closer than what maybe many of us in the South think?
I think it is closed at the top. The one thing that's different in the SEC is the bottom teams there are much more competitive, and all their fan bases think they can win the SEC every year. You don't maybe necessarily have that with like the Indianas and the Purdues. Rutgers has gotten a lot better. They beat Miami last year in a bowl game. The addition of Oregon, who Dan Lanning has built them like an SEC team. If Lincoln Riley can get that defense going in USC, they're a national contender. The solid Washington was able to do with Kalen DeBoer. They're going to have to rebuild a little bit with Jed Fish. Michigan won a national championship. It's the first team outside of Ohio State to truly contend. And now in a 12-team playoff, James Franklin and Penn State are going to be in the mix. And they've done a good job recruiting, and they recruited at a high level. So I do think it's close to the top 5 or 6 teams. I think you could put in a bucket and kind of swirl around for both conferences. But the back end is where the Big Ten still needs to make some strides.
Well, let's talk about one of those coaches you just mentioned, and Kalen DeBoer now with Alabama. What kind of transition? Do you think there will be a big one? Do you think Bama will be in the kind of the similar spot they've been the last couple of years?
It's tough to replace a guy he's the most successful coach in modern college football history. Like, there's no question about that. That's not up for debate. Like even last year when we said we were about to bury him into the ground after a loss to Texas, all they do is get back to the college football playoff, beat Georgia, and do a lot of things that, not many people have ever done. So it's going to be tough for that. They obviously lost some of the portal. DeBoer came in. He's kind of stabilized it. But, if you told me they go 9-3 or 10-2 this year, I wouldn't be shocked. I think they'll probably make the playoffs. They'll be right on that edge. I think 4 teams potentially from the SEC could get in. So it's the question, can they be better than an Ole Miss? Could they beat a Georgia? Can they have some upsets? They've got a tough schedule. They've got to play Texas. I think people are kind of gifting Texas and Georgia in. Who are going to be those 3rd and 4th teams? How are they going to battle? How is that going to look? I think Kalen DeBoer has what it takes. I think he will be good, but anytime you have any type of coaching transition, there's always going to be a little bit of a blip. And I like Kalen DeBoer. I think he's a great coach. But, if they go 9-3 or 10-2 and sneak into the playoffs, I would view that as success given what you just came off of.
Bobby, is there a team that you think might surprise us this year that gets into the playoffs that maybe we're not mentioning right now? Because it is 12, so there's a lot of teams that are being thrown in that mix. But maybe a team you're like, don't be surprised if this team finds their way into that 12.
Maybe I could look around the count. Like if USC gets a defense and has an efficient offense, I think they could be 11-1. I also think they could be 7-5. Like that's the kind of variability you're seeing right there. In the SEC, I think you could see maybe a Tennessee or LSU sliding in with where Tennessee's been moving with Heupel and where LSU, depends how good Nussmeier is, and if he's, his quality and his talented is what people think, and they can get that defense going. USC and LSU are very similar. If they can just go from like the 120s to the 60s, they'll have a much better shot. So those are a couple of teams there that I think will be able to get it done. And I think Clemson's probably a favorite in the ACC to potentially win it. And then if you look at the Big 12, guys, I could pick 6 or 8 teams and be like, hey, if any one of those teams won it, it would not surprise me.
Bobby, I'll close out with an A&M question. If I were to tell you that Connor Wegman's going to play a healthy season, just based on that and with what Coach Elko's known for defensively and what they have coming back on defense, what kind of year can you see from A&M?
I have to go and look at their schedule a little more. I know it's not the easiest thing in the world. Obviously, opening with Notre Dame and Texas being on there. I would think, like, if you think as a first-year coach taking over a program with the talent that, like, everybody has in these 2 Big Ten and SEC, trying to build that thing, and not all records look the same about how the games feel and everything, but if they're at 8-4, 9-3, and they get a nice upset somewhere, and they're in those big games, like you're not getting blown out, then I think that's a win. Like the problem is if you play Texas, you get smoked. Yeah, maybe you go 9-3, but the big teams that you play, you lose to Notre Dame, and maybe you beat the teams you should. You don't feel as good about it. But if you can get a nice upset in there and play tough against the good teams, I think that's a great trajectory for A&M and that Elko program.
Bobby, I appreciate your time, man. I've been a listener of your programs for a long time. Thank you very much.
Hey, anytime, guys. Let me know.
Take care.